So far, there's no evidence that yesterday's explosion was an attack, and instead many in Lebanon are blaming it on decades of corruption and poor governance by a political class which has ruled the country since the civil war. Well, let's get more analysis on the situation now from our international affairs editor, Sanam Shantyaei. Sanam, only on Tuesday we were delivering the news that the Lebanese foreign minister had resigned, saying the country was on the brink of becoming a failed state. Then, 24 hours later, a dire situation became much, much worse.
Absolutely, Tom. As they say, when it rains, it really does pour, and that certainly seems to be the case for Lebanon, which is already facing a plethora, a long, long list of challenges. Yes, Lebanon does have a long history of political and economic turmoil, but today it's facing its worst economic crisis in decades, which has no doubt been exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. Today, Lebanon is one of the most indebted countries in the world. And even before the pandemic, the World Bank had predicted that over 50% of the population would be living beneath the poverty line if this economic trend continues. There's also hyperinflation. Around 30% of the population is unemployed. Over the past 9 months, adding to that, since October, the Lebanese pound has been free-falling. It's lost 80% of its value. And the reserve of foreign currencies like the US dollar have been diminishing, if you like, which has made it even more challenging to bringing imports to the country. That's why the destruction of the port is so significant at this point. So that is a long, long list of challenges. There's also, as you mentioned, a political vacuum at the moment. And so, frankly, the list goes on. So because of everything that I mentioned, the people of Lebanon are extremely angry this Wednesday. And the big question to address now for all of us is, will this mean that there will be another wave of protests, which have been somewhat stifled over the recent weeks?
Yeah, and Sanam, grief is showing signs of turning to anger there in Lebanon already. It's been just under 24 hours since that explosion struck. I mean, do you think this tragedy is likely to breathe new life into the protest movement that predates this disaster?
It is a good question, and there are, of course, something that you alluded to earlier, reports circulating that the ammonium nitrate that was held in this port for a number of years was sort of waiting to be disposed of. So one source close to a port employee telling Reuters news agency that a team that had inspected the area 6 months ago had said, if this is not moved, then all of Beirut, quote, would blow up. So if that is the case, it would be tantamount to negligence. And so the people of Lebanon are saying, why wasn't this done? It would have been easily avoided. And the mood is beyond anger. The Lebanese are saying, we don't just want prayers. We don't just want solidarity. We don't just want you to post pictures on social media. We want two things. We want justice and we want help. So this house arrest of the officials that you mentioned earlier, who oversaw the port storage and guarding, is just the tip of the iceberg for them. Now, earlier, I spoke to one activist in the capital, Beirut, who told me, look, previously we stayed on the streets for 4 to 5 months during these largely peaceful protests, but the actual revolution itself didn't see the light of day. This time it's very different. We don't have any hope. More than 100 people are dead, something that we've been reporting on throughout the day. Some are still finding their relatives beneath the rubble. Today, she told me, Sanam, today is for mourning, tomorrow is for revenge. She also said that from the conversations that she's been having, it's not just about making demands anymore. They absolutely want the complete overhaul of the establishment, the removal of the ruling elite. And these words really do have weight, because the crisis that Lebanon is facing at the moment is certainly marking the biggest threat to the country's stability since the civil conflict. And one example of that anger is that Saad Hariri, a former prime minister's envoy, was attacked earlier when he went to visit the grave of his father. So anger, Tom, is certainly palpable this Wednesday in Lebanon.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that, Sanam Shantyaei.